Uh, hey, good morning. I didn't know if the camera was running. Good morning to you. This is a Sunday, and I believe it's the 22nd. I'm not sure, but it's somewhere around there. This is Sunday, and I am at work. Now, I wanted to tell you that the reason it's a really good idea to come to this channel is because you follow the older people. And I looked at my analytics, and as usual, we have a bunch of yeasty old men. And essentially, this channel is just a circle jerk. And of course, we're going to get old yeasty men. All right? No women, by the way, that's for sure. But that's about the way the ball bounces here at this channel. The one thing that you will get is that you'll get a good teacher, because my mom was the best teacher I ever saw, hands down. I never saw a more unique and beautiful teacher in my life. So I will tell you about that briefly, and then we will move on, because that's going to be the thing today. And I'll do another video as well for you, not associated with the news. One of them will be. My mom was smart enough when she was a young woman to understand that particularly little boys, like 5 years old up to like maybe 9 or 10, maybe 11 or 12 even, but usually around, that 5 to 9 business, boys can't sit still. And girls sometimes are the same, but it's not as bad. And this is, called hyperactivity, blah, 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 attention deficit, all the rest of it. What makes me tell you that I'm one of the greatest teachers and why it's so good to come to this channel is because my mom was such a good, amazing teacher and the best in the world that I ever saw with my own two eyes. Now, what I can remember about my mom is that, and it was really a sad thing because my mom could never really get this going. And she tried, but she didn't have money, and she was very bright and so forth and so on. And she could always play a part, like she could slip on a doctor's coat and people thought that she was, whatever. But I think she was a doctor because I think she did have her degree in different things. And I know she had her degree in, I forget, occupational therapy, I believe, because that she held a couple of jobs. She was supervisor at a major training facility, which was for handicapped people and so forth. And I think back on my mom now, and I can remember a couple of stories. She used to work in Meriden, Connecticut, and Meriden was one of the first malls that I ever remember. I think it was called the Meriden Square, if I'm not mistaken. And that was in around 69 or 70. And in 69 or 70, these malls were just getting ahead of steam. In 70, and Subway sandwiches was also a startup. And they had gone to this thing called quadraphonic. The radio stations were experimenting with these quadraphonic channels and so forth, but of course, you can't really have anything more than stereo. It's probably just too expensive and all that. But it was during the time of the Flower Children and all that kind of spacey music, like Jimi Hendrix and The Who and Led Zeppelin. They had like and Yes, and all these musics. And all these music had certain types of qualities that would, make you go into a different frame of mind. Obviously, that's how it was. But I have to be careful I don't drift off here. But Meriden Square was a beautiful little mall, and I believe it was 2 stories. And it came out very early, like 70, or I think it was like 70, maybe 69. I don't remember. And it was always the same thing. You had Spencer Gifts, and it was loaded with restaurants and so forth. But Spencer Gifts was the thing. And of course, anybody worth their weight in salt, at least, when you got to the mall, the first thing you had to do is go to Spencer Gifts. And then you would go in and go to the black light section, and you'd look at all those posters that would glow and everything. And then they had those little things, like diet kits, not real diet kits, but like jokes where, somebody that wanted to lose weight, you'd help them by sending them a knife that was cut in half, a fork with no tines on it, and a spoon that had a hole in it. So that was these little funny little things that you could go on, all these different notions. So I miss Spencer gifts about that. I'm sure a lot of people my age and beyond do also. Anyways, my mom worked in Meriden, Connecticut. She was a supervisor. And I'm not sure she was a supervisor. She just worked in occupational therapy. And I didn't get over there too much. I was just a young lad, maybe, 7 or 8 years old. I do remember it. And she dropped me off at school, and then she'd go off to Meriden. Now, I can remember a couple of times when I walked in, and I might have been 8 years old, which is pretty young. Maybe I was 8.5, 9 years old. But folks, and she used to make jokes because the people were so odd that had these special children sometime. She saved a note and showed us. Some people refer to a hat as a toque. That's French. The Canadians call it a toque. Sometimes you could call it a hat. You could call it a bonnet. You could call it a cover. And she received a letter from one of the parents, because this is in Connecticut and that's cold at times. And when they would go out, my mom would sometimes have to, take them out from building to building. And I can remember my mom brought home a note, and it said, please do not let my son go out without a lid. And they called it a lid. And my mom always kept that. I don't know if she framed it or not, but I still remember. So you have all these really strange kind of things that happen. But I went there one time, and I used to go with my mom. My mom had bought mats made from some sort of polyester material, rubberized on the bottom. And she had a type of, may God rest her soul, as with a lot of us, when your parents get older and you get to be 35, 40, no, not 35, maybe 40, 50 years old, you start seeing it, and there's not really much you can do about it. And my mom, because of this, what I'm telling you is because of this, my mom went through a really bad time of hoarding. And generally speaking, the people are smart. Generally speaking, they're not, like dock workers or something. They're, usually higher end professionals and so forth that do that. Not higher end, but certainly people that have been around the block a time or two. Let's just put it that way. And that got real bad. And I did not know how to deal with it. But it got real, real bad because my mom had a mobile home, and she had like a place, like a little patio there, screened in porch. And it started getting real bad. The neighbors complained. And then that spilled over into her bringing excessive, and when I say excessive, you could take my word for it, furniture, particularly bedding and tables. And you can imagine this in a single wide mobile home. So I always felt bad for my mom about this because she had a system called locational motor math, and she was smart enough to realize when she was very young that boys in particular, 5 to 9, 10 years old, they can't sit still. And they call it all sorts of different things, ADHD and all this other stuff, hyperactivity, blah, blah, blah. And my mom always thought it was kind of normal. And I'm sure my mom would refuse medication for the children. I'm sure of that. I'm sure she wouldn't put them on that. What she did do, and before I forget, when I went and I saw my mom over where she worked in Meriden, and it wasn't only there. She also worked in Storrs, Connecticut, which was really not more than 30 miles from Boston, from what I remember. It's a quiet town. And I can remember a couple of places that she worked. And when I'd go in there and my mom would walk in, the electric smiles that would come onto the faces of these poor people in those training centers, because your typical employee there really did not really care much. They wanted their money and, do their time and go home. And my mother was really very special like that. And I'll never forget the looks, the radiant smiles from people who had, problems, smiling, and they had, paralysis and, crippling. And these people would just come to life. I'll never forget that. And it's because my mom to be a good teacher, you also have to be an amazing person. There are good teachers out there. There are great teachers, but there were no teachers like my mom. And for that part, me too, because I humiliate you and downgrade you into learning. It's a sad thing, but that's just the way I do it, which is why I don't have any subs. But when you come here and you listen, you get real smart real fast, generally speaking. So, anyways, she had this system, and she did fortunately patent it because Sesame Street tried to copy it. And my mom had mats. They were big, not like this, but like big. You could stand on them, which was the idea. And she had the numbers from 0 to 9. And she had Velcro on them. So 1 had a little Velcro on the top of the number 1. Hence, one thing you could pull off with Velcro. 2, it had it on each side. 3, it had it on the points. So I later found out that my mom based this on the original number system, which was angles. Was it the Roman system? I forgot. It was a Greek system or a Roman system. I forgot now. It was an ancient system initially, which tried to use angles. So if you take the number 3 and go like that, you'll find that it has 3 angles. And it was pretty interesting. And I did so poorly. I can still remember this. I did so poorly in geometry because it requires a certain type of intelligence, which I lack, even now. And the whole class was getting it, and I didn't really get it. And I can remember that pompous teacher who was around 55. He was a jovial, heavyset teacher and kind of a guy who you'd go to borrow a cup of ego from. And, he kind of, I didn't get it. And, I was like the only one in the class that didn't get it. And, the class is kind of snickering and stuff, and I'll never forget this. And then he said, well, some of us in here aren't getting it. And that was really mean to say and has no place. And now probably wouldn't be tolerated. Although it might be, you can't get every single thing. But that was very humiliating to the student, me. So, and I remember when I was young, I cried at school when I was in first grade and second grade. In second grade, I think that's when it started because first grade, they treat you with kid gloves. Grade 2 in Connecticut, where I went, that's when it started to hit the fan. That's when you had to toe the line and look at the board and listen to all that. That started pretty early. And that was back during the time when a lot of the teachers were like drill sergeants back then. In the very late 60s, it was like 68, 67, 68. They were like drill sergeants. I mean, that was the thing going on with Vietnam and all that. So I've got to recollect here so I don't forget what I'm going to tell you about that thing with that pompous teacher. And I said to him, I said, I don't understand this, but I understand the idea about the original numbers and the angles. When you hear somebody that knows all the angles. And he said, well, he essentially said, if you're so smart, why don't you get up here and show us? So I showed him the original number 1, which is made like this. Not the number 1 like this, but it went this way and then down. And there was actually an angle. And it wasn't like that. The original number 1 was made like almost like a letter A. that had one angle at the top. Number 2 had, it looked like a Z. There were 2 angles. 3 with the letter 3 like a W on its side. These all corresponded with the angles. And even the number 4, if you draw it like this, you'll see there are 4 angles. And then it gets a little harder as you get on. And we came to 8, and the original 8 was made like 2 diagonals, one pointing downward and one pointing upwards. And if you count the angles, there are 8. And he was so pompous and so foolish that he looked at the number 8, which was just simply an upside down triangle. And on the bottom, it was also a flat base and then going up the triangle on top. And they connected the letter. It looked like an 8. And he said, there's not 8 angles there. And I went over there and I showed him. And I counted the angles. And if you count it, you'll see that it's true. It's not just 6. It's 8. There are 2 additional angles on each side. He didn't catch that. And he said, you show me 8 angles. And I showed him. And when I did, I can remember, you know how you have kids that are like Skip in that movie? What was the name of that movie? Where the kid sleeps with his friend's mom in private school. Skip, I forgot what the name of that Class. The movie was called Class. And Skip was the son of the Burrows, which was the main family in AT&T. This is all fictional, of course. But, there's always a kid like that in public school. And they're very smart. And you can tell they've got the right kind of genes. They've got really solid muscular bodies, if not over muscular. The lacrosse players, you got to be tough as nails for that kind of sport up there in New England. Soccer and so forth, but soccer is a little bit different, but same. So this kid, I remember him looking and he smiled and he said, whoa. And it really made me feel good, which is why I know what I'm talking about. So generally speaking, I don't say it unless I know. Generally speaking, although some people have caught me, okay? Now, my mom would take these mats. They were big enough to stand on. She had a 0, 1, up to 9. And 0, of course, has no angles, circle. And I'll try to move this along here. While we're young, Rodney Dangerfield used to say, but she would take these mats and put them in a big, giant circle, and she would play duck, duck, goose, which was just basically one person goes around and taps each child sitting on the mat, and then, duck, duck, goose, and then the kid would have to get up and run around and chase her. And this was all very brilliant by my mom because she understood the hyperactivity game. She understood that. And I remember doing that with her and so forth. And I did it a lot, actually. She took me with her many, many times. And it's just a shame that it didn't work out for her because it was really a good system. And when you got back to your mat, she would bring out a card and it would say, let's say they were on the number 5. And she would ask the kid, what is this number? And, these are young kids, some of them were very young and say, what is this number? And they'd say 5. And she'd say, prove it. And my mom was real good about this. She could make everybody smile and so forth. And then the kid would go and count the little points on the number 5. And they weren't the exact. They were just, 5 was made like this. She put 5 dots spread out on the number 5. Same thing with 3. Or whatever the number. And, she'd say, prove it. And then, and it was a really great system. And I'm sorry I couldn't have carried it on for her because she actually put in a what do you call that? Patent. Because in 73, I think it was, or 72, and my mom registered that and patented it in the 60s. And I think it was around 72. Sesame Street had one show where they started doing that with putting the points 5 little things on the number spread out over the number. And my mom put a quick end to it. And they did it only, I don't know, as long as my mom saw it, so maybe they were doing it for 2 weeks. But I watched Sesame Street, and I've never seen them do it. So that's courtesy of my mom. Believe it or not, she patented that idea. So it was terrible for Sesame Street because it's much harder for children to understand, 5 chickens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's much easier to understand and become familiar with the number in a complete way. That's why my mom was brilliant about that. So nobody else did it at the time. Now there might be thousands of people that figured that out. But anyways, I watched a thing today with the police in some town in Florida, and I will show it to you. It'll probably be my next video today. It's about 21 minutes. And it is really one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And it is an amazing learning device. And I mean, I'm a teacher anyway. I mean, I got this channel. That's basically what I do. But if I was in a classroom and I was trying to teach young adults, this is what I would do for them. I would use that because it's one of the things, Star Trek is another one, so forth and so on. What I'm going to talk about now is teachers. And the media is so left slanted right now that their hatred of Trump is so severe and so complete and all encompassing that they're doing things right now to spite him that are bad for the country. Even if you don't like Trump. Even if you do or don't or whatever it is, they're doing things that are becoming really hazardous to our country because of the hatred, the immense hatred for Donald Trump, almost exclusively. And I don't know where, it was. It was I forget where it was. It was Utah. Was it Utah? It had a religious name to it. I forgot. It had a... And the public school decided to let out their children to go and protest the taking of the immigrants out of the country that were not here in a normal manner. We'll leave it at that because I don't want to get into those other terms. Okay, through nefarious means or something there too. And oftentimes, many of these are violent criminals that are dangerous to society. Many times, not always, but many times. So they're taking the children, and the news is reporting it, that the children were responsible for getting out there and making the protests a little bit out of hand. And then you got police chiefs that were out of uniform that came in and they were wrestling young women to the ground and all the rest of this. And again, similar to what I told you that I watched this morning early, we've got people that are so stupid they don't even have a 70 IQ. We have a police chief that wrestled a young teen girl to the ground. For what reason? I don't know. But I can show you, but a lot of you will know that. Now, whose fault is that? Well, there's an ultimate truth, and then there's an implied truth. And yes, when there's a protest, you're going to get all sorts of problems and escalations. And this police chief should have known that and should not have been suckered in. Not unless they had 100% backing, and they did not. This was just kind of a small, like 30, 40 students protesting. I think it was in Utah somewhere, but it was a religious town. It was, I forgot the name of it. So you'll see it. If you go on there, you put female student wrestled to the ground by sheriff out of uniform. So because of the focal point, Donald Trump, we cannot overcome and do the right thing, no matter who you are or on what side you are. Because if the shoe was reversed and there were rallies getting people into the country who had nothing, like if you had rallies like that and you had people coming up to protest that, I would say the same exact thing. I would not be in favor of letting out children to go and try to stop these people coming in these support rallies. Why? Because they have no business doing it. Even if they're teens, they're not old enough, they're still learning life, and they have no business doing it. They can do it on their own time, but not during school hours. You fucking kidding me? This is like a fucking joke. And they came out on that. I watched the video and they said, if you kids do not get back in here, you're going to be suspended. So either come in or you're going to be suspended. We're going to get your names, identify you, and you are going to be suspended. Now, I don't know what happened after that. Now, why is this? It's because of Donald Trump. And I'm going to give you a really good learning example, and it's very similar to what I saw this morning. Okay? When you have a situation like you have with this, it's an explosive situation. So I'm going to give you an example as it relates to Trump. Let's say you're tasked with giving enemas to people who need enemas in a hospital. Not everyone is going, because an enema is a bad thing, and it's really traumatic and invasive, but sometimes needs to be done according to doctors, okay, or whatever. And when you do that, Trump is like the enema. Do you understand? And it is capable of all sorts of real problems because the problem is the enema, not the person. The person doesn't like it, generally speaking. Now, there could be all sorts of different things, including liking it. But there's all sorts of different things. I say this because most of you are so stupid with an IQ so low that you can't understand anything except the enema, Donald Trump. Not enemy, but enema. You put it into the anus. So before you do this, it would be a really good idea to take precautions because some people may leak from their anus when that goes in. And it could get so bad that you could have explosive turbo diarrhea, which could explode and get onto your person as the one giving the enema. Furthermore, there could be people that will cock their rear end just right and spray onto you. This is what you have to be all aware of. It doesn't matter that you don't like the enema. That's Donald Trump. You have to be prepared and you have to take the proper precautions. It's exactly the same. And we're getting people that want to go and destroy the enema. And that's exactly what it is with Donald Trump. You can't do that. Trump is an unfortunate part of the landscape in this country right now. I am not real excited about Donald Trump, frankly. I think he's an egotist. There's a lot of things I don't like about him. There's some things I do like about him. But I typically do not agree with some of what he says. I agree with some. So when you come here, you will learn how to relate Donald Trump with an enema. And it is almost exactly the same. So if you know that somebody is going to do ballistic spraying of fecal matter from their anus, then you need to be prepared for that. And you need to say, hey, this person has done ballistic shooting of diarrhea onto the nurses. And you take those precautions, even though you don't like the enema. Folks, it is such an embarrassment to have to get out here and say this stuff to you, because myself's excluded, of course. You are so goddamn stupid. I don't think most of you can even form a 70 IQ. And I mean that. And it's getting so dangerous when you take kids out of school to go, and I don't care if they're protesting on the right. It's the same way. I would say exactly the same thing. Do not let these kids, whether one way or another, go out and protest on school time, and do not encourage it. And they're saying that the children started it. It's the teachers, you stupid fucking idiots. It's the teachers, all leftists. You understand? With rare exception. Take care, folks. Now you know the Trump enema parallel, and you're a lot smarter. Don't forget to subscribe and be nobody. Bye.